Hello. You can see I haven't progressed very far. In fact, I haven't progressed at all. I haven't touched it. Haven't touched it once. And I'll tell you why. If I can think why. My beautiful drum, which I am not yet able to start a show with an actual tune. I'll put it down there. So welcome to SATSANG on a Saturday afternoon. SATSANG being what I call a SATSANG being an opportunity for, traditionally from the East, for someone, normally a wise person, often in the spiritual tradition, to talk about stuff, what they knew, what they'd seen about life, and for people to listen and to think. It was a moment of quiet, a moment of peace, where people could absorb wise words. I mean, wise, I guess it's a kind of depends on your definition of wise, but the fact that they would be there must mean that they think the guy or the gal is going to speak wise words. And they would listen. There was a moment for listening, and then there was a moment for asking questions. And they would ask those questions, and the wise person would answer. The wise person might have been called a guru. In our culture today, guru's become a bit of a bad word, a four-letter word almost. A guru, who actually has the word guru in his name, laughs about this, because the way we think about the word guru these days is nothing to do with what it really is originally, which is a teacher. So a spiritual guru is simply a teacher. The gurus, the spiritual teachers, which I appreciate the most, are those who ask more questions. And it's the same with teaching. The teachers I've always appreciated are the ones who have asked more questions than given answers. That was quite rare, actually. Normally in our education system, you go there, teachers throw the stuff they know at you. You try to catch some of it. Oh, got that bit, writing, scribbling notes like crazy. And if you go away, possibly having written everything, doesn't mean you understood anything. Then you try and memorize it for the exam. There was one crazy teacher, lecturer actually, that I remember from university. I remember quite a few teachers. The crazier, the better actually. The crazier, the more I remember them. And their lessons, which actually says something. I remember one guy, he was a statistics teacher at university. Can you imagine how dry that could be? And indeed, we had mathematics teachers who were unbelievably boring. They came in, turned their back to you, scribbled on the board for the hour. You couldn't see what they were writing as they were writing it. They moved to the next board, scribbled more stuff. So whilst they were explaining to the board what they were scribbling, which you couldn't see, you were desperately trying to scribble down what they'd scribbled on the first board. Great education system. I don't know how much of it's changed. Maybe, I don't know, have to go, someone from the ivory towers could tell us. Anyway, the sort of guru I like is the one who imposes nothing. Of course, the guru has to tell you something, otherwise there's nothing to think about. He or she may even tell you that that's the way it is as they see it. But there's no imposition whatsoever of their belief on us, because it wouldn't work that way. It can't work that way. You have to see something for yourself. So my musical interlude, the might actually get started. That was my musical meanderings, which really was just a few notes. And no, I haven't done any lessons on my beautiful musical drum. We might have a bit of music from outside because in the little courtyard where I live, a Latin American family decided to have a party, and it's happening now. So on a beautiful sunny afternoon, I have closed all the shutters because I was a bit worried that I wouldn't be able to hear myself think, and you wouldn't either. As it is, I can't hear anything. So on a lovely sunny Saturday afternoon for the Saturday Satsang, or the SATSANG with me, where I share my stuff, I'm in the dark, illuminated by artificial lighting. Yep, I can still hear it. Now, one of the approaches, which very much goes with satsang, is accepting what is. And that's a good example. I could easily have got stressed, got worried, got annoyed. They didn't ask us if they wanted to have a party. Like car after car of family and friends and hangers-on arrived. And I could have, got pretty irritated about it. And here I am. I'm not particularly irritated. I feel okay. And actually, I can't even hear anything. All I had to do was close the shutters. And this feeling of getting annoyed about something, what exactly is that? And you can apply it to anything. Getting annoyed because a painting isn't going your way, getting annoyed because someone criticized you, getting annoyed because you can't start that book. What is this annoyed feeling? It's basically that things aren't going our way. They're not the way we want them to be. And why do we feel that? We feel it because we think things should be the way we want them to be. We think there must be some, maybe we think the universe revolves around little old us, and it's an anomaly when things don't go as we want them to. The trouble is, everybody else is thinking that way as well. So if you think that way, there's going to be times when your little world crashes into somebody else's little world, which aren't the same, and then you get conflict. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I get this right, but I like the idea of it. I like the idea of not expecting things to be the way you want them to be. And then, what have you got to lose? If you're not expecting them to be a certain way, then you're not upset when they're not that way, because you didn't even imagine that way. And if you had hoped things would be different, like nice and quiet for this moment that we have together, and there's loud noise, well, that's the way it is as well. And either you live with it and you just say, fair enough, or you find a solution which isn't too difficult. I close the shutters, I can't hear anything now. So it's this kind of accepting, this allowing, which is a nice approach to have to life, I think. I would say that as well for my drum, my beautiful musical drum. I'll make this a bit more interesting and show it to you again. My beautiful drum, which I invested in and haven't actually learned. I fell in love with this when I heard someone else doing this sort of thing. The one in the middle is the most beautiful. Can't hear it. Just resonates for ages and ages. And I still haven't been able to do it or even practice it. And that's okay. It has to be okay. That's the way it is. It's not the time for me yet, at the moment, to learn to do that. But it's in my mind, you see. I'm not forgetting it. I'm talking about it every week. I'm still including it as part one, the musical meanderings, even though I'm not doing much meandering. So it's sitting there, and when the time is right, I'll do some practice, and I'll play you something that actually sounds like music. Right, let's move on to my weekly ideas. Now, don't forget, this is a satsang. The idea of the satsang is that you ask questions. And I've got one. I've got a comment. I might need my glasses for this. Hi, Tinkutsa. Thank you very much for joining me. Hi, Sab. You're right about the crazy teachers. They made an impression for sure, and I love them. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They're the ones that we remember, and for good reason. Because if you look at the way we like to learn, the brain likes to learn. I like. I think it was some education convention smashing guru, Ken Robinson, I think it was in the UK. He had a book called Creative Schools. He's had a few books anyway. and a TED talk, which was watched as one of the top TED talks about education. And I think it was him, it might even be someone else. The point is, this quote said, if you wanted to imagine or design the perfect, absolutely worst way to learn, it would be our modern education system. You shove kids into classes, you put them in rows, they can't talk. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but in some places it is like that. You put them in rows, they can't talk, they have to listen to the teacher all the time, they don't really interact much amongst themselves. Ages are put together as if all kids progress at exactly the same level. You know, another month on, all the kids have progressed to exactly the same level. It's nonsense. So the crazy teachers, I say crazy, of course they're not crazy. That's just a it's I use the word obviously meaning that they're not crazy at all. They were actually the enlightened ones. They were the ones that wanted to inject elements of how we love to learn. How do we love to learn? We love to learn when it's fun. It makes us laugh. Humor is an amazing tool for learning, for remembering something. You remember jokes. And humor goes straight to the deepest emotional centers. It's one of the most beautiful things that can happen, is that you laugh, or that you make someone laugh, which is almost even better. It's unusual. I remember a maths teacher doing this ridiculous walk, trying to, I don't know, illustrate the angles or something. I just got this image of him still after, what, 30, 40 years, doing this crazy balancing on one leg, waving his arms around in a maths lesson. I remember that. I don't remember anything else, and certainly no other teachers. I remember an economics teacher who used to come in after lunchtime. He'd been drinking, and he was in a sort of mood. He was red, and those lessons were amazing because he was relaxed. Anything unusual, changes in rhythm, not just, you know, you come in, you sit down, an hour later you go out, you're like in a zombie state. None of this works. And if you do the opposite, it's perfect. I mean, even the classroom is artificial. It'd be better to learn outside. It might be better to learn on your mother's knee, to be honest, or helping your mother out in the kitchen, or helping your dad out, I don't know, in the fields or whatever. So yeah, so Teen Kutsa. Yeah, I mean, I've been in education for many years, and both with kids and with adults. So that's a very strong subject for me, that one. So do ask questions. That's what this is about. No questions, you're just going to have me talking. Now, I'd like questions on productivity and on creativity. You know, because creativity is nice. It's like about having the ideas. Productivity is actually producing them, making them real, taking them from the formless, like imagination, dreams, wouldn't it be nice if, to look what I made, look at this. I had a dream to do this crazy picture. Sorry, I'm coming back in a minute. I remember. Sorry. It isn't working. I'm just destroying all my pictures. One time I had a dream to do a crazy picture. That was the creative part. I mean, having the idea. But then the productive part was actually creating the thing, i.e. being productive and creating the picture. So you can't have one. Well, you can have one without the other. You can have the creative idea without producing it, but then you'll just be stuck with the creative idea. So questions about productivity. How do I actually get down to doing the things? And questions about creativity. How can I be more creative? And if you like, we can even have questions about why. Why do all this stuff anyway? What's the point? Why create? Or is creating a picture, you know, slapping some paint on a piece of canvas with funny shapes, is that less or more meaningful than serving in a supermarket, or writing a book? Or is writing a story more valuable or less valuable than writing a newspaper article? These are all questions that we can talk about, and I would love to talk about them because that's what I'm interested in. So this satsang is not particularly spiritual, although we can definitely go that way, because originally satsangs were more spiritual. I'm not claiming to be any sort of spiritual guru whatsoever, more of a creative guy. But to be honest, creativity, it can be as fun and as simple and as playful as you like, and it can be as deep and meaningful as you like. And in my paintings, like the one I just showed you, I tried to combine all of those aspects into one thing. So let's move on to weekly deeds and ideas. This is where I just give you a lowdown on anything that's happened to me during the week which doesn't fit into the other categories, which I'm coming to, which are my photo chronicles, where I talk about Paris photographs and texts that I've written, a productivity tool to help you be more productive. This is coming up, coming attractions. Then I will give you a poetic interlude. I hadn't written a poem until a couple of days ago, and this satsang, the SATSANG, made me write a poem. And it wasn't forced either. I was quite happy to do it. So you see, this is called social accountability. When you say to someone else, other human beings, even if it's just a computer or a Facebook group, I'm going to be doing this, and I've got a section here for a poetic interlude. If I haven't got a new poem, I'm not saying I'm going to do a new one every week. In fact, this week I'm showing you a brand new one and an old one, which is quite similar. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have felt any pressure whatsoever to write a poem, and I'm supposed to be a poet. I mean, I don't like labels, so rather than call myself a poet, I call myself someone who writes poetry. But if I haven't written a poem recently, I start to feel very uneasy about calling myself a poet. And I share that idea with some of the people I work with. I say to them, if you say you're this, whatever they call themselves, because people generally call themselves something, or they say they want to be something. I want to be a writer, I want to be a designer, I want to be a health coach, I want to be anything, a runner. And they'll say, that's great. So when was the last time you did it? And if they say, well, I mean, I haven't actually done it recently, but, you know, I definitely want to, then I just say to them, are you sure you're a writer? You haven't written for a year? Are you sure you're still a writer? Yeah, it's in my soul, you know. Well, that's okay, but that's the creative part. It's in your soul. Maybe you've got ideas, but where's the productive part? You're still an amateur. You're not a pro. And pro doesn't mean that, I'm going to talk about that in my book selection, where I read an idea from a book. And the book I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about is this. It's called Turning Pro. And this idea about turning pro, it's not anything other than a mental shift. But when you turn pro, you have a completely different approach to when you're an amateur. The amateur will say, well, you know, no, I haven't actually, no, okay, I haven't written for a few months now, but, you know, I'm definitely going to, this is the amateur. The pro says, I wrote this morning. I didn't feel like it, but I wrote this morning because I write every morning. So this is, but you know, it's not just that easy. So you need to work towards that. You can have a sudden shift, which turns you into a pro. Maybe a moment of frustration, utter frustration, irritability with yourself, whatever it takes. But there's a certain shift that takes place. So I'm making that shift happen in myself in more and more areas in my life. For example, poetry. It's not a coincidence that I've got a section here called Poetic Interlude, because I want to turn from an amateur to a pro. In other words, I want to be a poet who has written a poem this week, not one that, I did one 5 years ago. No, you're not a poet anymore. Not in my book. You were once, but you're not anymore. If you've written a poem this week, you're a poet. Or, as I said, I don't like labels. You write poetry. You can decide where you want to put that limit. For me, it's about a week. If I say I'm a painter, I say I paint. If I haven't painted for a week, I start feeling that that's not valid anymore. Same goes for poetry, for writing, for practicing my drum. So I don't say I play the musical drum now, because I don't. But if I practiced this morning and yesterday and the day before, I'd say I play the musical drum, even if it sounds crap. So let me know if any of these ideas are hitting home, if they're interesting to you, if you've got anything to add to it. Questions, please, in the comments. After the poetic interlude, a book recommendation. Now, what I've decided to do is I don't have time to read a book a week. And I can't spend, it would take ages to actually cover everything in it. So I'm going to choose a book every week that I like, take a point from the book and just share that point. So I might come back to books in other weeks, right? But that's why I'm going to do it. So Turning Pro is the book I will mention an idea from. Then The Meme Streets of Paris. This is similar. I hadn't written the meme before this morning. It's here, Meme Streets of Paris. It was there last week, so I wrote a meme. I've done a meme today. Artistic leanings, I'll tell you about that when I get to it. And creative climax, we'll see what's coming up in the week to come. All right, let's go back to weekly deeds and ideas. Right, well, actually, I asked in a Facebook group for some ideas on a list of questions which I'm going to share with people as a free PDF. People on my mailing list. This is a new thing. I've started a mailing list, and I did that with a friend. So a friend was doing it, who's starting her coaching business, not starting it, but she needs starting her website. And to show her how to do it, I did it myself. So I'm creating a mailing list. I've got 2 people on it at the moment, and they're both me. Or maybe I've got 3. Maybe 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who was watching, is on it, and my friend who I helped create the mailing list. You can see how far along that road I am. I had mailing lists in the past. They haven't really worked for me, so I'm trying again. On every single site you go to, if it's the first time you're visiting, from me, my sites, the painting site, the artistic site, the Paris site, the poetry site, and the coaching site, you should get a box coming up the first time you go there to sign up. I'll show you what it looks like. It's if you click on, no, it's not there. It's not there. Oh, silly me. There it is. Yeah, you go to the Infinity Coaching site and it says newsletter. And if you click there, you get to a sign-up form for my newsletter. Now, this is new. So in tandem with doing this weekly satsang, where I share my stuff and invite questions. Questions, please, on anything to do with creativity and productivity. Give me your questions or just say hello, and I'll chat about them. I'm going to do a newsletter. This is going to be a kind of summary of my greatest hits from the week, as it were, with lots of tips on how you can be more creative and productive. All right, so any site, any of my sites, there should be a pop-up, and there will soon be a newsletter link in the menu up here, and you click and you can sign up and you get free stuff and my best ideas and so on. Okay, so what was I saying? Yeah, I was saying that weekly deeds and ideas. So there was that, and in a Facebook group someone wrote a comment saying it was actually meant to be a question as part of a new list of 9 questions which I'm creating, which I'm going to answer these questions, 9 powerful questions for leading a more meaningful life. So in a Facebook group, someone told me, well, why are you struggling? Ask in the Facebook group. I'm a bit nervous about that, but I did, and I got some answers in a group where I normally don't get any. I won't talk about my feelings of personal rejection right now, because I'm not supposed to feel those, am I? Anyway, that's another story. So I got a question, and I wasn't sure about one of the questions. It was something like, Sab, do you ever just sit and do nothing? I think it was, Sab, like, here's a question for you. Do you ever sit and do nothing? But the way I read it at first was, Sab, do you ever sit and do nothing? Or even, Sab, do you ever sit and do nothing? And I started thinking, that's a good question. Do I ever actually sit and do nothing? And then I thought, well, if I do, or if I did, I would want to do it pretty vigorously, I think. I've tried meditation in the past, and this, well, basically I didn't do it. I haven't become a meditator. I don't meditate. Having said that, I go for walks in the countryside. So that particular sort of sitting down and doing whatever meditating people do or don't do wasn't for me. But I've just started Tai Chi, and I went to my Tai Chi lesson today. I didn't know that there was a thing called 9 AM on a Saturday morning. Apparently there is. And apparently that's when my Tai Chi course starts. So I trogged off to it. Wasn't feeling particularly enthusiastic. In fact, I was sort of kind of cursing myself and the people who organized it at that time. But I had this comment in my mind, don't you ever do nothing? And I was thinking, well, Tai Chi is kind of, it's my attempt to do nothing, but in a slightly physical way, because Tai Chi it's an internal martial art. So you're supposed to be working on yourself, working on your own demons. And it's almost also called moving meditation. I saw written somewhere, and I like that idea, moving meditation. So you're doing these movements like this and turning, and I like that idea. I thought this might be the way I can get into a kind of meditation. Anyway, I was walking along, not very enthusiastic about it, and then as soon as I came out of my place, though, I suddenly realized there was almost no one around. The sun was absolutely gorgeous just before 9 o'clock in the morning. Very, very few people around, few cars. The place smelt fresh. I had this image of the sun being warmly chilly. No, what was it? Brightly chilly or something like that. It was bright, it was warm, but it was chilly at the same time. That magical feeling in the morning before the earth has warmed up, but you still feel the warmth of the sun. And I walked down a bit further, and I saw when the sun, of course, it's very low. I got the French word in my head, effleuré. It brushed. There was a wall with a rough texture, and the sun was just on the edge of that wall, and it brushed the edges of those bricks which were slightly sticking out. It was a gorgeous texture. You could see the light and the dark, the cavities and the bits sticking out. And I was starting to think to myself, I wouldn't have seen that if I hadn't got up at 9:15 in the morning. That is so beautiful. And of course, when the sun is lower in the sky, it's warmer. I mean, the color is more towards the red end of the spectrum. It's a lovely thing. And then I walked down a bit further, and I saw the train going past. And I was thinking, wondering who was going to work at that time in the morning. And then during the course, it was a lovely course. It was soft movements to warm up with. There's a rather sort of more gymnastic side to it. Then there were the movements themselves, which were very interesting, moving my body in ways I'm not used to, doing gentle sort of exercises to get but some of them, if you've ever tried holding your arms up like this for more than about 2 minutes, pain arrives here, I can tell you. So it's not just gentle stuff. Then there were people helping me to get the movements right. They're very, very precise movements. And there's this combat side to it where you're imagining an adversary in front of you. So you can't have your hand like that because they'll still punch you in the face. It's got to be like this. And then the fingers have to be just right. They can't be like that because they might smash your hand. It's got to be like that. All sorts of stuff. So it's very, very interesting. And I felt pretty good as I left. And then there was the human contact, of course. There's something about it. The group mentality, sort of tribal, all people doing the same movement at the same time. Although I fight for individuality, we're tribal animals, it's for sure. So doing this, even though the movements you could say they're ridiculous or don't make any more sense than any other movements, there's still something about doing it. It's like everyone cheering at the same time in a football crowd. It's kind of similar. So I mean, I've got to stop making fun of football crowds because I'm doing something very similar and I'm getting something out of it. To each their own. And when you do something like that, you realize that others are doing their thing and it's okay. And then I walked back and I saw a pretty girl, and that made me smile. And I found a couple of pieces for a future artwork on the floor. Let me show you. The amazing pieces which will be part of a future artwork. A bit of bent wire, a rather rusty-ish washer thing in metal, and a bit of barbed wire, broken barbed wire. And that will go into a painting, because my paintings, encrusted into them, have bits of daily life, stuff that I've found on the ground, stuff that I've seen when I've been walking around Paris. Anything really, either linked to me, to Paris, or stuff that I find on my travels. Could be something that someone has given me. So you never know what you're going to find in one of my paintings. Right, that'll kind of do for weekly deeds and ideas. And I'm going to try and move it on a bit faster. Please do feel free to ask comments, ask questions if you do. This is the idea. Creativity and productivity questions. So anything to do with productivity and creativity, I want to hear about it. And I know 𝗏𝗏𝗪 has given me a question, which I'll get to in a little while. Let me just move on to the next thing, mind you, to move things along. We're already at 30 minutes, and I'm only on number 3. So, is it me, or do I talk too much? All right. What have I been up to in my Paris Photo Chronicles? Let me show you. All right. So here they are. And this week I'm doing a theme. As you can see, I've done the same thing I did last week. I prepared my 9 photographs in advance, and I scratched away some of them, part of the photograph, and just left bits, hints, to see if people could guess where it is. And it's a theme this week, folks. It's a theme, and the theme is the Montparnasse Cemetery. So I went to the cemetery thinking I would get a couple of shots. I had 2 shots in my mind, maybe 3. As usual, the muse took over, Lady Eiffel smiled, and I was just snapping away, and I ended up with 16, which I'm quite happy with. So I decided to do a theme grid. Don't always do a theme grid, because the danger is you get stuck in a theme, and if I'm trying to find something to say about the same thing 9 times in a row, 9 days in a row, I might dry up. So that's the danger, but in fact, I generally don't dry up. So up until this point, I have published these, plus another one, which I'll show you in a minute, and another one which I won't, because I haven't put it here. And as you can see, there are some wonderful things to discover, even in a cemetery which isn't as sort of exotic as the other 2. I mean, the mythical ones, really, in Paris are Père-Lachaise and Montmartre. Those are really quite something. And yet, I've just discovered that Montparnasse is actually not as boring as I thought it was. I mean, it's not boring at all. There's some really interesting, unique sculptures, for example. And there's even the little things, you know, the little details, which if you look out for them, you've got the eye, you're looking up and down and left and right and in and out and comparing one thing with another, you will find the shots, or the shots will find you, I should say. This is actually on the side of a grave, and to get this shot, it looks like I'm looking up and he's looking down at me, the skull. In fact, it's the opposite. The skull is below me, about waist height or lower, and it's looking down to the ground. So to get the shot, I had to be even lower than him. So in terms of photography, not only don't just accept the first thing that you see, also imagine what it would look like when you change angle. And I played around with the angle. Whenever I see a subject, I generally move the camera all over the place. I move in and out with my legs. I will move the camera down and up, to the side, walk around, go behind it, see what happens, keeping in mind what's in the foreground, the subject, if it is, for example, the skull, and what appears behind it as I move my body around it. It may be that something interesting appears behind it, a really interesting contrast. It may be that if I move back, I can shoot the subject, like the skull, through something else. In other words, something closer to me than the skull can become a kind of frame. So that's another way of making your shots more interesting. I've always loved this grave. There's something about it. It's just surrounded by these skulls. You ask yourself, I ask myself, what do people think when they create a gravestone or a tomb that is a bit different? What are they thinking? Is it the person themselves that's inside that has said, I want it like that? Or has someone got a bit creative afterwards, tried to make it like they think the person would have liked? Or would the person have hated to have their tomb surrounded by skulls? Who knows? And that's part of the fun. We don't know. And my job is not necessarily to know or to even guess. It's just to record, interestingly, and to add my slice of creativity to somebody else's. For me, that's what creativity is, in part. It's taking what I already have in me, seeing what I see outside of me. Ideas come from somewhere as well. Throw it all together into the mix and produce something that has never been seen in that form before. And anyone can do that. And I think anyone should. I think creativity is at the heart of everything. In my meme today, you'll see I put that idea in no uncertain terms. And it's also at the core of my creative philosophy, my life philosophy, if you like, which is learn, create, share. But it's not a line. It's not you start learning, then you create something, then you share, full stop. It's a circle. You learn, which leads to creating, which leads to sharing, which leads to feedback, which leads to more learning, creating, sharing, learning, and it goes in all directions. So this was one that I wanted. This was the shot I wanted. I knew it was there, and it still was. This is such a wonderful thing. This is actually my screen of the day, if I can share that with you, which looks like this. Let me see what I'm doing here. No, foreground is what I'm trying to show you. Yeah, that's the screen of the day, a photograph. It's not that shape really. It's the shape that I showed you, the square shape. And you might be wondering what this is. It's just amazing. As I said I think I said in the text that goes with this, Paris is just amazing for stuff. Let me see if it's in the text and I can read it for you. Strolling along a typical tree-lined Parisian avenue, you may not be immediately struck by the quantity of curiosities, oddities, and obscure items, indications, and intriguing assorted seat furnishings and fabrications, great and small. That was a sentence, wasn't it? And it's not even finished. But look again, there are plenty. Brought to you largely as the legacy of my lean years, spent wandering the streets for countless hours, zoom lens in one hand and a similarly shaped canisters in the other. Be they ancient gaslight fixings, vents for fumes to escape, the sadly defunct underground circular railway, secret access points to off-limits catacombs or wartime bunkers, or sensitive water supplies, air and light apertures over a spookily navigable subterranean canal, mysteriously extending lights at dusk on a central city bridge, erstwhile brothels, Kabbalistic Freemasonry monuments, revolutionary vandalism, military call-up posters. Believe me, with only my life to offer you a choice selection, I fear I'm in trouble. But here's an old favorite, a highly patriotic cemetery collection box. In terms of writing, you'll notice there weren't many sentences there. I'm aware of that, and sometimes I decide to do that just for the hell of it. I think there are about 3 in total. So as you read, keep breathing, okay? Otherwise you won't get to the end of the sentence. Yeah, so it's a patriotic box for, I think it's for people who have been hurt in the war, something like that. And you find them in cemeteries, a few cemeteries, not all. I think there's one in the Montmartre, maybe in Père Lachaise, but I'm not sure. And they're absolutely gorgeous, like a letterbox. You're supposed to slot in your money, your coins, or your checks, I suppose. This one's interesting. I think they're all interesting, but well, if I don't say it, you won't realize maybe. So I think this is interesting. It's really wandering around looking for a subject, and sometimes the subject isn't obvious, so you've got to invent one. You can invent it with the 4 lines of the shot. I've chosen a square for all my photographs, which makes it even more challenging, I would say, because you can't play with the vertical or the horizontal format. You know, it's got to be square. But I love that constriction, and it really forces me to be as inventive as possible. For example, there are angles here. They're only angles because there's a square frame. You see what I mean? Now, there's a repetition of these 3 windows. It's very grey on the outside with those lovely rectangular dark inset parts, which give you the shadow effect. And the 3 windowsills, and there's lines going down. And it would have been quite interesting just with that if the window panes had been black. As it happened, this is the side of a tomb. I mean, a pretty impressive tomb. And what is inside the tomb? Well, there's a stained glass window in beautiful colors. Now I moved myself around so that I could get at least 2 of those windows showing those colors. I won't say that if you were in the graveyard you would see what I saw here, because this sort of detail gets lost in amongst the mass of graves. And even then, to realize that there's the light that's shining through, because I mean, I must admit, when I play around with my photographs, my aim is to move them halfway between the grim reality, in other words, this didn't look as cool as it does in my photograph, to a kind of fantasy land. So that's what I'm aiming for. I'm not aiming for pure reality. I'm not. So when people say, give some sort of comments on the photographs not being very realistic or something, well, they're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be anything other than exactly what they are. So this beautiful kind of tapering away to one side as well, and I decided to play with my text as well. So you can see that that's another way in which you can be creative. Depending on what your style of creativity is, play with the elements you have, and there's no limits. I mean, I could have written the text in the normal rectangular box, but from time to time, when I see that it's feasible, I will incorporate the text in the creativity of the shot, just because it's pleasing. Every extra layer of creativity that I can add to a base level pleases me, makes me smile, makes me feel satisfied, it makes me feel alive, because for me that's what creativity is. It's being alive. That's what being alive is. It's being creative. So any new layers that I can add, there may be layers of creativity in the words, there may be double meanings, and I'll read this one and then I think I'll call it a day for that. You can look at them, you know where they are. So I will read this just to see what I come up with. And again, as I said, when we create, it's satisfying, it's great. Then we move on to something else. But when we come back and we rediscover our creations, it's almost as though we are reading them or seeing them for the first time. And this is wonderful. We see them with different eyes. When I create, when I write my text every day, I almost always leave it for a few hours and come back to it before I publish. And without fail, I see it with other eyes. They are other eyes. They're not the same eyes as before. I come to it as a reader, not as a writer. And I see things that bug me as a reader. The fact that I wrote it also bugs me. But I know that that's the way it is. So I come back to it, see the things that bug me as a reader, or I think, oh, he used the same word twice there. That's gone. I change it, then I publish. I like what happens when you draw an imaginary line around some illusory hues. Unreal, because objects themselves don't actually have colors, but absorb some wavelengths of light and reflect others. The light reflected stimulates, or not, various photoreceptors in the retina, and after an eerie early hour, diving deep down into Google's goggle-eyed ganglions, I realize it's just so much more complicated than that. But the point is, it's all in our head. Everything we imagine is in our head. I'm looking around, I'm imagining everything. I'm getting stimulated by stuff, but I'm imagining everything to be the way it is in my head. Someone else could see it differently. For example, some people don't see colors. They see it in a different way. Animals would see it differently. I might see this with a feeling of positivity, that I'm looking at a rather nice light. Let me show you. Okay, there's some beautiful lights. I like these lights. Someone else might not find those lights particularly pleasant. So we do create our own reality. Anyway, where was I? It's all in our heads. So the little square I like to picture things through, that's my square photographs, isn't that different to what our own eyes do. If you think about it, as you peer out of your personal peepholes, there's a fuzzy area at the edge of vision, around about here, mine is here, around about here, where things just seem to fall away. Things have gone. This wall here, over here, has gone. This has gone. It's not in my vision. we see what we direct our attention towards. I'm directing my attention towards my screen, on which is appearing something that I call a picture with words, and I'm reading them. But I'm not really looking at words, I'm looking at the computer screen. What we ignore pales and fades. The things that are off to the side disappears. It's gone. As I'm looking at this has gone from my consciousness. The walls have gone, the wall behind me has gone, the kitchen has gone, the office has gone. They theoretically still exist, but for me they've gone, as I'm concentrated here. Or never even enters our fragile reality at all. What wonders are you painting a pretty frame around today? So, me thinking about stuff. What's really amazing as well writing this stuff is that sometimes I do go down into Google and off I go. I know quite a bit more about the retina now than I did a couple of days ago. I may have learned it about 45 years ago, but it had gone and it's come back. So this all comes from being in a creative state of mind, creating, being open to stuff, doing a bit of research, discussing with others, seeing different points of view. Have that spirit and you'll never be bored. I'll leave my photos for that, like that for today, and move on to the next thing. What is the next thing, folks? I'll tell you what, I'll answer Tim Kutzer's question. Where did I put it? Okay, and she said, it's a question, folks. Do ask questions in the, hang on, let me see. Questions about creativity or productivity in the chat. That's the idea. I would love to write a collection of short stories. Scratch that. I would love to regularly write a short story so that at some point I publish a collection. Smiley. But I am working on some other projects, you know, online courses, non-fiction, ebooks. What would you suggest? Starting work on the collection once I am done with the other projects, or having multiple projects run at the same time? Is there a way to balance everything, like a daily, weekly plan, perhaps? Okay, I'm noting the time. It's 47 minutes. Just in case you're not watching, I will tell you at 47 minutes I talk about your question. That's a really great question, and it's at the heart of a very, very common dilemma for creators. We try to do too much. We have so many ideas that we don't focus on one thing. And what happens? Well, of course, we don't end up doing anything particularly well. Or we do scraps. We do a little bit here, a little bit there, then we have another idea, then we come back to something, but we've lost interest, or we can't be bothered, or we've moved on. So I get exactly what you're saying, Tini. You are a creative person. You're already doing stuff. You're writing regularly. You're creating courses. But this creative part of your brain is saying, hey, it'd be great to do this as well. So what do? Do you risk starting something else and then leaving the thing that you're currently working on, which will become yet another unfinished project? Believe me, I know what you're talking about. That was me talking. Cheers, by the way. I'm going to do a painting like this soon. I'm inspired by this mug, which was a birthday present from my mother and my son. I am moving towards getting more focused in life, to turning pro, in fact, as Steven Pressfield says in this book. To turning pro, in other words, taking my creativity more seriously to get more creative. And I think there does come a point in life where creative people, they feel more and more frustrated at not creating enough. And sometimes it's a bit like an addiction. If you're addicted to something, if you're lucky, you get to a point where you are so sick of being a slave to your addiction, you decide for once and for all to do something about it. But it's you who has to have that revelation. It doesn't come from people telling you you should, or warning you about the dangers of, or criticizing you, or encouraging you even. It's got to come from you. That doesn't mean external factors don't help, they do. One of the things that got me off the booze was reading a book, a great book. But it treated me intelligently. It made me realize I was insulting my own intelligence by being a slave to this thing. And my intelligence didn't like that. I didn't like that fact, and that moved me. And I was frustrated I'm not creating enough. So now that I'm in a good shape and I can create, am I creating regularly? Well, yes and no. I'm creating every day. Every single day I create. Am I creating enough? Well, it depends. If I say I'm not creating enough, that means I'm fundamentally not happy with my life. I feel there's something lacking. I feel I'll be happier if I'm creating more. I'm not saying that the desire to create isn't a good thing. It is a good thing. Desire pushes us forward. But at the same time, we also live our life from moment to moment. And if we're not enjoying our present moments, we're not enjoying life. And what is the kind of definition of happiness? If happiness is what we want in life, how can you be happy? Some people say it's a lack of desire. It's literally not wanting anything to be different. So I go with that. I like it. Having said that, we move forward in life through having desires. We're meant to have desires. We're creatures that have desires. If we didn't have desires, we wouldn't make babies and the species would finish in one generation, for example. We have this huge creative drive, this desire to create. We can't make babies every day. Well, some people, I guess, can try. But generally, there comes a point where the creative drive has to come out in a different way than the fundamental biological drive to survive, to procreate, to find food, to make shelter. For example, you can be creative in making shelter. It's pretty creative to have put materials from the natural world, pulling trees together at the top to make a shelter you can sleep under without getting wet. This is creative. But once you've satisfied those basic needs, our creative desire is still there. It seems to be something about us humans. And that's great. I mean, it's the way it is. I decided to call it great because I want to be happy with the way I am. I've got this drive to create. I want that to be a good thing. I want to like that fact. So what is the balance between creating enough today and being happy with that and being frustrated because you're not creating as much as you want to create? Well, it is a balance. I would say choose something that you're going to be creative with every day, one thing, and be creative with that every day. Then you can go on a sliding scale. You know, there's a famous book, The One Thing, and it talks about just doing one thing. Did you guess? Do one thing, almost to the exclusion of all others, and work on that until you've done it. And then choose another one thing and work on that. In principle, it's great. I think it would work if you can do it. It doesn't work for me. It works to an extent, but not fully. I will take one thing, and it's worked with me for writing. I've got my one thing. And my one thing is writing. It's become a habit, and I do it every morning first thing. I combine a Paris photograph that I've played with, I write text to go with it, and I publish it. And I do that every day. That isn't exactly what the One Thing book is talking about. It's talking about a project that you want to achieve, you know, to reach a goal you want to reach, and then you stop and you've achieved, and yes, I did it. Now, one thing number two. That's what I'm talking about with my photographs, what I've managed to do, or what has happened to me is that I've found something which it just so happens is that I find it a real pleasure to do every day. But in a way, that's the one thing that I've mastered. It's something which I've made a part of my life, and I'm on autopilot. I wake up and I do it, and then I do the rest. Then I struggle with the rest. Then I, break my head over what I'm going to do, and oh my God, why can't I do painting? I say I want to paint. I say I'm a painter, but I haven't painted for a week. And like I said at the beginning, I think I should make the one thing automatic and commit a certain amount of time to it each day. And then do a bit of something else. Work on another one thing. Work on a new one thing. as long as the other things has become like eating, like, you know, having your shower or doing your sport or brushing your teeth. Make it a non-negotiable part of your life, and that means it's gone into habit. And now you need a new one thing. Make that new one thing the story writing, and make it a small part of your day. Do 5 minutes, do a paragraph or a page. If you want, do an hour. What normally happens best with habits you're trying to start or trying to justify doing is to do a very small part, but to do it. Even if it's one sentence, do it. Make it so small, you can do it in a minute. You could literally do it in a minute. But if by any chance you're starting to write a line, makes you think of a second line, give yourself enough time to write a few more lines just in case. So you're kind of sabotaging, you're tricking your sabotager, your self-sabotager. The self-sabotager will find all sorts of reasons not to do something. You need to trick it. One of the ways of tricking it is by kind of lying to it. You say, don't worry, I'm not going to spend an hour on this thing that you don't want to do. I'm just going to do a line. A line. Of course I can do a line. So you tell yourself, the self bit being the one that is going to find all the excuses not to do it. You tell that, literally, I'm going to do something that is so easy, it's laughable. Okay, even you, who finds all sorts of reasons, even you can deal with that. Okay, so just don't worry about it. Then you do it. And suddenly, you realize that you've written 10 lines instead of 1, or you've written a page instead of a paragraph, or you've worked for an hour instead of 10 minutes. So I would do that. Make sure the first thing you're trying to do, your other stuff, is on autopilot, and you do it without questioning. You do it first. Okay, do it first. Then do the second thing. And you can pretend the second thing has become your new first thing. And see how it goes. Make it small. And yeah, give that a go. I won't go any further because that's enough blah, blah. I'll start repeating myself. See what happens and let me know. All right. Oh, I've got another comment. My goodness. All right. Oh, it's 𝗦𝗫𝗪𝗂𝗧. Wow, this is getting strangely interactive. All right. What does she say to me? So it's more about making a choice and not get distracted along the way. As long as you know the choice you made is the right one in the moment. And then she says, powerful advice, thank you. But let me address this just very, very quickly to see if I need to. The thing is, it's really irritating as a creative person to be limited to just one thing or 2 things or even 3. Some of us have 10 ideas. But we have to say to ourselves, do you really want to be creative or not? Do you really want to create this new thing? Do you want to write a short story? If you don't write the short story, you've got to say to yourself at some point, well, actually, I've got to stop kidding myself. I don't want to do it. If I really wanted to do it, I'd do it. So, you know, be honest with yourself. You know, stop messing around. You know, do you want to do it? If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, you're not doing it. Let me say that again. That wasn't clear. Okay, so far you haven't done it. You say you want to, but you haven't. You know, well, shut up about it already. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, think about something else or do something else. You've got to be honest with yourself. Because you could be saying, I want to do it, but I haven't done it yet, but I want to do it, but I haven't done it, but I don't. You could do that until for the rest of your life. So at some point, it's going to get pretty irritating for yourself. So the best thing to do is get irritated with yourself to the point where you actually do what you say you're going to do, or shut up about it and don't ever mention it again. So if you do want to do it, well, just do it. Just start. Give it a go. You know, literally stop watching this at the end and write some ideas for, I don't know, 3 short stories. Do it. Look around you. For example, I've got a cup here. I did this exercise with someone once, actually, who was stuck. A writer who was stuck. And I said, look, she was stuck on this story, a big long story, couldn't move on. It was irritating her. She didn't want to leave the big long story, but she had no more ideas. She was frustrated, but she didn't want to start a new one. I said, look, do something really easy and fun. Write a list from 1 to 10. Look around you and imagine a short story, one short story scenario for each of those. Okay, so this says eat, it's a cup, you see. Eat diamonds for breakfast and shine all day. I said that, you know. I happen to have another cup which was cracked. I said, you know, you got a cracked cup, write about a cracked cup. You got I came up with a few other ideas. It could be my drum, you see, the man who couldn't play the drums, or, you know, the man with the magical drum. And to be honest, this is now a story. This is now a story, a short story, and a very beautiful short story about a princess, about a queen who was cursed by a fairy who was trying to do a nice spell for her when she was a little girl by making her shine beautifully, by making the only thing that she could eat, diamonds. But as she grew up, she was eating diamonds, and she was blinding people with her beauty, and she was blinding her own children. And she had to find a solution through finding different colored diamonds, because there's not just white ones, there's lots of different colored diamonds. Anyway, a beautiful fairy story came out of my suggestion to her to do something just like that, really quickly, really easy and fun. You know, how fun. Imagine a story title from, I showed her a cracked cup. There's now a story title which she's working on, the Prince with the Cracked Cup. I don't know what the story is, but something like that. You know, look around. So, you know, try that. Write a list of 10, because brainstorm. Look around, find 10 objects, and write a story title with that object in it. And that will spark new ideas and new ideas. So your brain will say, yeah, but, you know, it's this idea of writing a story. What is it that's worrying about this? You think you've got to write a whole damn story in one go. I'm going to write a story. That sounds like too much work. I mean, you know, thousands of words or hundreds of words. Think about the idea, correct everything, run it by people, get it published. No, don't think like that. What could a title be? What could the first line be? What could the last line be? And write it. Write the first line just for fun. You know, I don't know. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess, but her beauty was her curse. There you go. First line. It's about the diamonds, because she's beautiful because she has to eat diamonds. In the very first line, it's classic, so people know they're entering a story. But all of a sudden, her beauty was her curse. Oh, wait a minute. What the? Why is that? Well, you want to know the second line, don't you? So tiny, teeny, tiny steps, and one tiny bit of creation always leads on to another. I love that cup. Right, so let's move on. Thank you very much for your question. I'm so happy I've had questions. That's what it's about. We need more people. We need more questions. All right. Right, so where are we? Productivity tool. I may repeat productivity tools. I may modify them. I may talk about ones which I don't currently use, but I'll try and come up with something which will help you to be more creative in your daily practice. Here's one I like. It's a fun one. It's simple, and it turns received wisdom on its head. Oh, I haven't colored it in. I was going to color it in. It's called Sab's to-done list. Sab's to-done list. I don't know if you've heard of the idea of a to-done list. You might have heard of a to-do list. To-do list, you write down a big long list of things to do today, and you don't do any of them, and you feel bad about it. And that's generally how it works, isn't it? Or you always put too many on. You never get to the end. You spend more time thinking about your list or ways of writing a better to-do list than actually doing the stuff. And you prioritize and you give it nice titles. And try writing a to-done list. In other words, you write to-done list at the top and you leave it. And you go and do something. And when you finish that thing, you write what you did there. So in other words, it's not things you've got to do, it's things you've done. So the pleasure is in watching it grow, not in seeing how many things you haven't crossed off yet, and feeling panic, feeling irritated, frustrated, feeling crap. Oh my God, I've only done 2 out of 10. Failure again. No, everything you add to this list is a success because you've already done it. So give that a go. Look, I wrote, okay, some of the things I had to do anyway, but it doesn't matter. Look, Tai Chi lesson, corrected an essay for someone, organized for SATSANG, because believe it or not, this thing takes some organization, including things like writing poems, make a video. I made a video, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Talked to Leo, my son. Okay, so this is stuff I've done. I can feel happy about every single item on that list. I can put it in green. I can put a big tick. So try that. Poetic interlude. I'm going to try and get the length of this down, but I have difficulty. This is an example for the poetic interlude. It's an example of me doing something because of this SATSANG. Because I created this, because there's a section in it saying poetic interlude, I realized during the week it was in the back of my mind. And I thought, I'm going to write a poem, damn it. I don't want to have to just say, well, I didn't write a poem this week. If I want to call myself a poet, I don't. I want to call myself someone who writes poetry. I don't like labels. This is my big thing. I repeat it every week. If you have comments on labels, then please share them with me. If I accept any label at all, it's the label destroyer. So I don't call myself a poet. If I've written a poem recently, I might say that I write poetry. If I don't, I feel not very comfortable about it. So I wanted to say, here's a poem I wrote this week, and I did. And I've combined this with let me share this again, with my photos. My photos often inspire my poems this week. The poem that I wrote is one of these photographs in this series of the cemetery, but it's not there yet. And it's in my poetry site. My poetry site is called mysticrhythms.com. And this is the image. I have written the text, but I didn't show it here. And it's a very beautiful image, I think, because, and I say that as the observer, not as the creator. Like I said earlier, when I come at something again, I'm sometimes amazed by the beauty of something that exists in the world. And to be honest, it's almost irrelevant whether I created it or someone else did. So I see this image very, very beautiful. It's a juxtaposition. It's two things. It's what I was talking about earlier with the skull. There's a statue, and this is a statue of a woman with her head in her hand. And if you went around the other side, you'd see her lamenting for, I don't know, the loved one that has gone. I could have taken a photograph of this, but it's not strong enough, or it's just a representation of the statue. You can do it. It's not a problem. But I'm always looking for the extra thing. I'm looking for two elements which have some link between them. And here it is. Behind this, or in front of this statue of the woman with her head in her hand, which has beautiful texture, by the way. She's weathered, you know, she's as weathered. She too is in a way on her way out, which gives it even more character. Opposite her is this guy who seems to be looking at her like this, contemplating her attitude. He seems quite stoic. He seems to be observing. I think the woman who's mourning is mourning the person who is dead, and she isn't the person who's dead, whereas the statue is probably the guy who's dead. So there's a kind of play between these things. Maybe he's looking at her and he's thinking, I know what you're feeling, but don't worry, it's okay. The other side isn't that bad, or something like that. The point is, we can imagine. You can see his face, but you can't see hers. I think that's good as well. That's important, because you don't know exactly what she's looking like. You don't know what he's thinking. You can imagine it. There's a lot of emotion there. His seems more composed, more controlled. Even though he's the dead one, he's calm. he should be kind of more pissed off about being dead than she, who is still alive, theoretically, mourning the other person. But to be honest, it's those who are left behind that mourn. It's who have the pain. It's those that are left behind that the ceremonies are for, that the funerals are for. As for the person themselves, well, they probably have moved way, way on. Which is, you know, I always find it not amusing, but sobering, an interesting thought. All of the mourning that people do when someone has died is for them. It's not really for the person. Not really. The person's gone, bye-bye, out of here. It's for them and amongst them, those that are left. The poem I wrote was inspired by this. I always want my poems to stand alone. I don't want them to be tied to an image. But as I move on, I find that more and more they are becoming linked to the image I'm publishing them with. I never want the photo to be weaker without the words, and I never want the words to be weaker without the image. But I'm finding that there's a kind of synergy when I'm writing words and images together. And maybe that's becoming my thing, to be honest. I'm not against it. As a purist, I don't want that to be the case. I'd like a book of poetry, of my poetry, to be published with words and it be no images. But then again, I don't know if I do. To be honest, I think I want to link my images to poetry. I want that to be my thing. Why should I just write poems without images? That's not my thing. It's not my thing. This is all part of me, and there you go. So here's a poem that I came up with. It's called Closer. And the rhythm's a little tricky. I have to see if I can get it right. Got a very dry throat after I speak for an hour. Closer. Observe closely. You may see a finger flutter or not. Observe closely. You may hear a mother mutter by the cot. Look closer. You might catch a glimpse of a wince, eyes bloodshot. Lean close and you just might spy a rising, sighing breast or not. I'll try again. Closer. Observe closely. You may see a finger flutter or not. Observe closely. You may hear a mother mutter by the cot. Look closer. You might catch a glimpse of a wince, eyes bloodshot. Lean close and you just might spy a rising, sighing breast or not. This poem came from this image, and I'm not convinced these are my best poems, because for me, the emotion has to come first, then the words, and maybe linked to an image. Having said that, the image came, and it gave me this poem. So I'm not against it. I like it. It's what it is. It's what it is. And this reminded me of another poem, which I wrote 20 years ago. I went searching for it, also in a graveyard. I didn't go searching for it in a graveyard. I went searching for it on an old website, which still exists. I'm transferring it over to this poetry website, but I haven't got to the year 2000 yet, or 1999. And it was also, I think it was inspired by another statue in Père-Lachaise. Let me read this one to you. It's called, let me get rid of this, which hides things. It's called Only Sleeping. Only sleeping. She's only sleeping. Look, she's playing with a fallen leaf, a touch of colour, paper thin, holding it gently between her fingers, like a fold in a blanket, pretending she's dozing, trying not to laugh, the way she used to when you'd tickle her feet in the morning. She's only sleeping. Look, she's playing with the fallen leaf, a touch of colour, paper thin, holding it gently between her fingers, like a fold in a blanket, pretending she's dozing, trying not to laugh, the way she used to when you tickle her feet in the morning. And that poem was inspired by the statue with the leaf in the fingers, I think. And it's strange, isn't it, to read things you've written 20 years ago. 1999, 20 years ago. How about that? And by chance, I wrote another poem inspired by another statue of a lady in a graveyard. It's funny to compare them. There's no need to compare them. But something wonderful about creating is that you've got something to look back on. If you don't create stuff on a regular basis, it's a bit like old photos. Sometimes you wish you'd taken more photographs at the time. I think you should live in the moment, not all these people who spend their lives walking around. I mean, I saw this thing recently. It was an artist, a photographer, who had done a series of photographs. I can't remember what it was called, but basically what he'd done was put people in poses, or seen them in poses, where they were using phones. They were in together as couples, but they were both on the phone, or they were all on the phone. And what for example, there was a couple, they were in bed, and they had their back to each other, and they both had their phone like this. So two people, backs to each other, both with their phones like this. And what he did was he took the phones away. So there was this couple in bed, backs to each other, with their hands looking at their empty hands. And there were people in public, groups of people together in restaurants, both looking at their empty hands like this, not communicating with the people in front of them, the people on trains. And it was all about our strangely disconnected world that we live in. And as an older person now, in other words, someone who grew up when we didn't have mobile phones, this is striking for me, although I have a phone in my hand a lot. But what strikes me even more is the fact that my son, for example, he's growing up. It's normal from the word go to have a phone in your hand. That I'm trying not to be worried, because every generation is worried that it's never been this bad. Young people nowadays. So I'm trying not to be that older person. But having said that, if you've grown up with this thing in your hand, I'm sure our posture is going to change, and that we're going to evolve, and we're going to become like this. And we're going to have arms which are the exact way. I saw something. We're going to develop evolutionary pads on our hands which stop phones from falling from them, and the fingers will all gel together into one thing, and it'll become kind of rubber, like a kind of rubber, so that the phones stay solid. And you'll have a super big thumb which is pointed, and the size of it is exactly the size of a key on the phone. Anyway, that's the poetry pause. Create, people, create something for later, to look back on, to remember what you were like, to remember what you were thinking at that time. It might just be a journal, or it could be a poem, it could be a painting. You look at a painting, you can wonder what you were thinking, and things will come back, things will flood back. It's important. A book recommendation. Okay, so I'm recommending this book, and I'm not going to tell you all about it. I'm just going to pick one thing from it. It's called Turning Pro. It's a series. It's part of a series of books, very similar books, by this guy called Steven Pressfield. They're all great. They're about becoming an artist. They're about any sort of art, any sort of creative activity, doing it instead of just dreaming about it. The first one is a classic. It's called The War of Art, and I'll pick something from that at some future SATSANG. This is one I chose because this was dear to my heart today, this Turning Pro. Turning Pro isn't about starting to get paid for being creative. It's about changing something here. It's about a change in attitude. It's about looking at life differently, looking at your creativity differently. If you treated your creativity like a job, you'd create more. This might be anathema to an artist. I'll create when I want. I need the muse to touch me, all this sort of stuff. That's beautiful, man. But if you don't actually create anything, or very, very rarely, well, you're not really you're not fulfilling your true creative potential. Doesn't that kind of frustrate you? Aren't you a bit sick of not having a lot of new stuff to show people? So you're only doing yourself a favor if you try to add just a touch of professionalism. So for example, if you had a job that you're paid for, you don't turn up 10 minutes late, you might get fired. You just don't do it. And you might not even like that job. So why not treat your painting or your writing as a job? You turn up for it, even if you just go to from the living room to the kitchen where you work. You turn up for it at the hour you said you would start. You start doing it, but the difference is you're not doing a job you hate, you're doing a job you love. How about that? How amazing would that be? So that's something I'm putting into place. I'm putting certain things in place, things that I just do, like a job. And I suddenly realize, shit, I'm enjoying this. I just wanted to read a couple of things to you. Oh, look at that beautiful creative bookmark there. 𝗦𝗁𝗪𝗏𝗂𝗏.com. Infini de, in fact. Anyway, so he says a few things about amateurs. I'm just going to read the titles, very short chapters in some books. Some of the things about an amateur. And I'm just going to choose one or two. The amateur is terrified of failure, terrified of starting. The amateur is an egotist, he says. The amateur identifies with his own ego. He believes it is himself. He believes that what he creates is himself. And if he puts it out there and people don't like it, they don't like him. And that scares him. He also has a chapter which is really good. It says that the professional is terrified too. It's just the professional doesn't associate himself with the work. The amateur lives by the opinions of others. The amateur is terribly scared about what other people think of him. The professional isn't, doesn't care. That's the way it is. Some people will like it, some people won't. That's life. I create, that's my job. I can't be responsible for their reactions to what I do. I really like that idea. The amateur permits fear to stop him from acting. The amateur is easily distracted. Oh, yes. The amateur seeks instant gratification. Oh, yeah. The way I've got around that is I create things where I can get almost instant gratification, but they are things that build up to something bigger as well. In other words, most of my things, there's part of them that can be created and finished in a day, even if it's part of a painting or a text. The texts are small. My texts are small. I publish one a day. My photographs are daily. I get a boost, a feeling of completion from a photograph every day. You can split bigger tasks into small chunks and just make your satisfaction finishing that thing today. That's your success. You've got your boost. You've got your reward. You've got your little win. And you just want that little win every day. And because you've made your little wins part of a bigger win, you'll reach the bigger win. The amateur seeks instant gratification. The amateur is jealous. In other words, the amateur compares themselves to others. You're writing a book on creativity? Yeah, but look at this one. You'll never do one as good as that. That's how I might feel. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a second in another thing. The amateur seeks permission. The amateur desperately, do you think it's okay if I do this? Would you mind if... No. Professional just goes ahead and does it. The amateur lives for the future. Maybe one day I'll be... No, the professional lives for today and gets on with it, gets on with the job. Or the amateur lives in the past, regretting past mistakes, never thinking they'll do something as good as something they did, thinking that they're not good enough to do what they think they're doing, being an imposter. The amateur will be ready tomorrow. Tomorrow is always a great date for excuse makers to start, isn't it? Because tomorrow never comes. Don't start tomorrow, start today, etc., etc. So that's a good one. I'm just going to leave it at that, except for one thing. I've got a very interesting package today. Where is it? I'm going to open it in front of you. Where's my interesting? Oh, there it is. It's an unboxing. Look. And it came from the book depository, so I think it's a book. What's it going to be? Oh, this is exciting. It's like my birthday. Okay. What's in it? Is it a CD? Is it a magazine? Is it some new cooking implement? Oh my God, it's a book from the book depository. Look at that. And oh my goodness, would you believe it? It's called Creator. This is a new book called Creator, and it's by someone called Steve Chandler. And I love his books. They're short. They have short chapters, short sections, and they have quotes, and they're pithy, and they're human, and they're fun. And I'm incredibly jealous of him, except that I'm not, because I'm a professional, not an amateur. And one day I'll write a book about creativity, just as good as this, because it's not the same, it's different, because I'm different. I'm my own person. So I'm looking forward to looking at that, and I will be quoting stuff from that. That will be in future SATSANGs. I will be giving you gems from this, assuming there are some. Right, that's my book thing. Hey, I'm moving on a tiny bit. It's nearly an hour and a half. Imagine what it'll be like when more people ask questions. I wrote a meme thanks to this public declaration that I would give you a new meme every week. I didn't actually say that, but I want to. A meme a week, a bunch of words put together which are kind of interesting a week. If I call myself a writer, which I don't, I call myself someone who writes memes for this circumstance. Well, I need to have written a meme in the last 7 days, or I don't have the right to use that title. So I'm someone who writes memes. So, Sab, can I see the meme that you've written in the last week if you're someone who writes memes? Well, actually, yes, you can. And here it is. All of this stuff I'm saying to you is to help you as well as to help me. Everything I say about myself, see if it applies to you. See if you could take that idea that don't call yourself something, or don't say that you're someone who does something unless you actually have, and see what that stirs in you, see where that takes you. All right, I've done the poetry, and I've done now the meme. I had to show you this on Facebook because it's nowhere else for the moment. It's brand new, literally brand new. Published it a couple of hours ago. Here it is. See what you think. Creativity isn't an exception to the rule. It's not even the rule. It's all we can do. Each breath is creation. So take a deep one and relax, you creator. I struggled a bit with this last line. That's kind of part of what it is when you force yourself to be creative. It's maybe not as fluid as it could be. It's not like genius has struck, it just came from nowhere. But that's part of creation. You know, this blood, sweat, and tears. What is it? 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. Don't worry if you have to struggle a bit for part of it. At least you're in the game. At least you're creating. So anyway, it is what it is. I chose you creator. I was going to put a comma after the you creator. At some point, you've got to know where to stop as well, where to let your creation go, let it fly, and see what happens. It'll come back. You've created, share it. It'll come back and you'll learn from what comes back. You never let it go. You never let it fly. Nothing will come back. So I quite like it, and I like the photograph as well. Creativity isn't an exception to the rule. It's not even the rule. It's all we can do. Each breath is creation. So take a deep one and relax. You creator. You creator, you. I think we all are. I think we all are. I don't think we have a choice. It's just you need to shift. You need to shift how you see things. If you wish, or you can carry on just as you are. Artistic leanings. This is where I've got a problem because I haven't painted anything. In 1 week, I haven't painted. Can I still say that I'm someone who paints? I'm not sure. What I was going to do then, I did a video though to show you all my work in progress. You're only allowed 30-second videos here, so it was kind of rushed. I did one, it was about 5 minutes, and then I tried to upload it, and they said, huh? No way. So here's a video of all my stuff in waiting. I've got millions of little squares, and this is to inspire me to give you some new ones next week. Okay, so here's my video about all the things in waiting. Hi everyone, it's Sab, and I wanted to show you some finished works. I've only got 30 seconds for this video, so that's my Japanesey style. What I wanted to show you is these unfinished masterpieces. So much unfinished, so much potential, and I've just got to work on finishing this stuff. You see all these little squares? There's millions of them everywhere. And sometimes, I've got 5 seconds, sometimes they get finished. So I hope you like that. Tell me if you want to see it again. It's only 30 seconds out of your life. So I've got millions of these little squares. Well, no, literally hundreds of them. And they're all in the preparation phase. The base has been prepared and I haven't moved on to the next step. That says something, doesn't it? The ones I did recently as well, the black and white ones and red that I showed you last week. I'll try and show you one now. I did them because I could do them really quickly and they were simple and it stopped me from finishing all the other ones. Can you believe that? I did 4 of these new ones. That's one of them. Here's another one coming. I did 4 in the same series. It was really good. Really productive week. And of course they can all be moved around and everything. So I was so happy to finish. So happy. You can't believe how happy I was to finish these. Look, there's another one. And there's a 4th one in the series as well. You cannot begin to believe how happy I was to finish. And this is something else from this book, or one of his books. The amateur either doesn't start or doesn't finish, or doesn't do the work. And one of the worst of all is not finishing. The amateur doesn't finish. So what does the professional do? The professional starts, the professional works regularly on the project, and the professional finishes the damn thing. So I'm moving towards professionalism because I started and finished 4 new paintings in a week. And I'm determined to finish more work. Can you imagine how ridiculous that sounds? But can you imagine all the best-selling novelists that you love reading and all the music that you love listening to and all the, I don't know, paintings you love looking at and enjoying and appreciating if none of those people had been able to finish anything? Look at it this way. You are being selfish if you don't finish your work because you're not giving anybody else the opportunity to appreciate your wonderful, wonderful work. Why isn't your work any more wonderful, as wonderful as anybody else's? I mean, it is. That's the wrong question. Your work is just as wonderful as anybody else's. Get it out there. When all the famous people published their stuff, they didn't know if anyone was going to like it. Look at it the same way. We owe it to ourselves and to others as non-selfish people to share work. To share work, we have to finish it. So I'll make a pledge. I will finish at least a painting. There you go. I've narrowed it down to 1. I will finish at least 1 painting to show you in next week's SATSANG. Promise. I nearly did one for today, but didn't manage it. That little black one. All right, so that's my paintings. And we're at the creative climax already. Isn't that marvelous? Let me see. I'm sure I'm missing something. Oh yeah, I did want to show you this. This is the painting I want to finish, and I think I can do it quite quickly. It's a black one. You see, it's got the coins. It's got bits of don't know what. It's got little jigsaw pieces. And this I need to finish very quickly. It's frustrating, it's bugging me. That'll be finished next week. That will be finished next week. If it isn't, never watch me again. The creative climax is kind of what I'm planning for the next little while. Now, I've got a new creativity course coming. I'm working on a creativity course. I'm working on a big one, and I'll be working on a small introductory one to lead you into the big one. I can't give away too many details, but let me show you something which I created, which is kind of a sketch of the outline of it. You may think it's more complicated than you were expecting and more colourful, and that's the way I work. It's a creativity course. What do you expect? So my course will be based on the cycle of learning, creating, and sharing. It'll be over several weeks, and within each week there will be smaller cycles of learning, creating, and sharing. Every time you share, you get that boost. You get that need that we have for instant gratification, some feedback, something positive, please. So you'll get that regularly in a tribe and in a group, a clan, I'm going to call it. I don't like the word tribe anymore, clan, because my roots are Scottish. You'll be in a clan. And it's based on this cycle of mine, which I've kind of invented. The learn, create, share, learn. Hang on, learn, create, share, learn, create, share. I can't do it. I can't make my finger go the right way, but anyway. So that is very, very exciting. I've got help from people like Teeny as well. And it's brilliant. We're forging ahead. So thanks for that. And I have created a newsletter, which I will be starting. I think I'll be starting next week. So as I said, go to any of my websites, which may be my Paris Photo Chronicles website, my Abstract Art 𝗪𝗡2.com website, or �mysticRhythms.com, or infinitycoaching.biz. You go to any of those and you haven't been there for a while, you should get a pop-up. If you don't get a pop-up, you can go to a page. So for example, if you go to this page, if you go to this site, if you go to infinitycoaching.biz, you click on newsletter and you get the newsletter. You sign up for it, you'll get a free PDF, which is my answers, a nine-page document of answers to nine powerful questions for more meaning in life. I haven't written it yet. It's coming, but now it's out there. The idea's out there, and the idea being out there is the beginning of the creation. It's already started. So that's the way I work. That's the way I roll. So sign up for that, and you'll get one email a week. That's it. One email a week with a bunch of my creative stuff and a bunch of tips and advice for how you can be more creative and productive, having the ideas, getting the stuff into the real world. Thank you for watching. Spread the word. Tell me if you like it. If you're watching this on the replay, you can ask questions still in the comments. You can say hi. You can say you watched it. You can say what you thought. You can add your comments. And I would love you to ask questions even for next week. I can answer them next week or in any future weeks. And it's been a pleasure, me talking about my stuff and how I hope it inspires you with your stuff. And a SATSANG is about interactivity and questions. So I'm moving towards more people watching, having more questions, and continuing to share my stuff and putting myself out there. It's not always easy. And that, again, is to show you that if someone like I can do it, so can you. And I think you should. So that's it for now. And maybe I'll even play you a tune next week on my musical drum. You never know. I can call myself someone who plays the musical drum. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot, everybody. And I will see you again, same time, same place, probably next week. Bye-bye for now. And be creative.